improvement in instruction in Guilford over that for years. So powerful and so meaningful. There is no one, there are 9 of us on this board. We all have different interests, we all have different skills, we all have different backgrounds. There is nobody on this board, and I dare say nobody within the administration and nobody within the public schools, who cares more deeply about instruction, quality instruction, than Dr. Moore. I think that he has made that a passion of his. He's made it a focus not only in the homework, the new homework policy, but also curriculum development, in making sure that our teachers have adequate professional development and that the expectations on them are high, but also supported by all of us. And so, Chris, we are going to miss you. And you have really added a voice as a former teacher, by the way. I think one of the few former teachers that have been on the board lately. But they're now a very respected emergency department physician and professor, actually, at Yale Medical School. You've given us a perspective that I think has been deeply valuable, and I know that parents and the faculty and the students appreciate everything that you have meant to the Guilford Public Schools. So, on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank all 3 of you and recognize your service and wish you the best. I know you're going to miss us. And come back anytime.
We'll be here over there asking questions.
So I do have, you don't really get very much for me on the board for 12 years or 8 years or 8 years, but I do have a certificate that I would like to give you. I will be coming to each of your homes to make sure that you have this hung up. Dr. Moore?
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. And Mrs. Renner. And finally.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Now to work, yes, exactly. Action on the minutes for September 11, 2017. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Are there changes, corrections?
I had item 9.9 was also mentioned in our operations meeting. The BOE had asked an outside engineering firm, it should be
Correct.
And also, just a clarification point, going backwards on item 9.6, in terms of clearing and vacancy, it says the special education teacher is being called over until 9/18. I know we talked a little bit about the school psychologist being held. The school psychologist was being the hire as in process?
Thank you for the clarification. The school psychologist position is a new position, and we are holding that vacant pending information on our budget from Hartford. The special education position was a teacher who had resigned, and in collaboration with the new district, we are holding her in the position until 9/18 to transition our students into the school year and give us time to make a hire. There is a cooperative agreement among superintendents that if hires are made after August 1st, that teachers will remain in their district of origin for up to 30 days to assist in transition planning. And so I probably...
September 18th, not September 2018.
Well, that's what the clarification is.
Yes, it was September 18th. Yes, yeah, it should read September 18th.
Maybe we should just put 9/18/2017.
Exactly right.
Okay. Any other corrections, clarifications? Are those corrections all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Mr. Kazin abstains. 3.2 is the workshop minutes from September 25th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second. Changes, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Abstain.
And abstains. All right. Item 4 on the agenda is public forum for topics on the board agenda, and I would count also with Dr. Freeman's report on that. So I know that I think there's some people here about school start times. So if you want to do that now, that's fine. If you want to wait, that's fine. But if you want to address us, please just come up to the podium and introduce yourself.
My name is Irina Estrellas-Cottrell. I'm a mother of 2 daughters in the Guilford school system. Last week I was in a meeting and a new mom-to-be asked us moms who were there if we had a last-minute suggestion to her, advice. And I said, don't wake up a sleeping baby. And all the other moms cheered and laughed. And this is still the rule in my house, and my 2 girls are not babies anymore. We all know that for our bodies to work properly, we need a certain amount of sleep. This amount of sleep changes with age, as does the time of day that we need to sleep. An engineer I know well in my family said the human body is the most complex machine. It really is. It knows what it needs. In teenagers, it needs 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And the sleep needs to happen at a certain time because of the movement and circadian rhythm during puberty. The importance of circadian rhythm and its implications to our function was recently acknowledged by a Nobel Prize to 3 US scientists. The shift in rhythm is not only about sleep, it's also about learning and other behaviors associated with sleep. Most teenagers learn better later in the morning and afternoons. They exhibit less risky behaviors, such as driving fast or using drugs, and they maintain a sleep schedule in line with their needs. And data show that our society benefits socially and financially from letting the kids sleep when they need to do so. Professionally, I'm a scientist. I direct a program that I established specifically to identify mechanisms in the brain that do not work well in individuals with mental illness. An important question that we ask our new patients is, how is your sleep? Sleep is implicated in every psychiatric and medical condition. Disturbance of sleep can be a consequence of disorders such as pain or cancer. It can also be a predisposing factor to disorders such as depression, bipolar disorder, and others. Across medical and psychiatric conditions, the one common question we have is, how is your sleep? Teenagers are not miraculously protected from mental illness because of poor sleep. For example, a study from the University of Rochester that came out in September shows that adequate sleep and alignment of sleep with their circadian rhythm are most optimal in order to protect them from depression and anxiety. It is obvious not everyone who is sleep deprived is going to develop a psychiatric condition or engage in risky behaviors. However, given my profession, the knowledge I've acquired over these years, and the undeniable scientific evidence, I certainly don't want to stand by and wait to see which of these kids are going to develop mental illness and the consequences later in life. Mental health difficulties and associated dire consequences are on the rise in teenagers and young adults. A strategic objective of the National Institute of Mental Health is prevention. And so I urge you, Dr. Freeman and the Board of Ed, please let these kids sleep. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Chloe, and this is Allie. We're the junior class presidents. And we have been a part of the discussion in mobilizing the student body in this conversation about school start time. So our main comment that we talked about when we met with the other people that are trying to get this start time later, we were acknowledging that how tired kids are at school, constantly saying that they want to fall asleep in class, that they're tired, and that's like the main comment that kids make throughout the day. I'm tired, I want to go home, or like they can't complete tests because they're tired. So we also talked about how the performance in tests, when people say they had more sleep, they were able to complete their tests more and see their grades difference. We also talked about the survey that was given out I think it was our freshman year, and we noticed that we need to spread the word more out to our student body and how that will help us to get the information out to our class and other high school students.
So essentially, our role is going to be trying to mobilize our student body, as Chloe said,
And this can be done through mostly spreading the awareness of the multitudes of research that exists scientifically for the mental health of children and adolescents, and for just overall performance in school and work and in regular life, based on the sufficient sleep that we all need. And this has become an issue. Well, it's always been an issue, but there's more and more districts around the state and the nation that are moving their school times later due to the scientific evidence that's proven why sleep is so essential for teenagers, and how even a small amount of sleep each day can accumulate into much more efficient workers and able people. And another concern that as students we see is upperclassmen in high school are beginning to drive to school. And in the morning when they're waking up, it can pose a threat to our safety as well, because when people are tired and after not having enough sleep the night before, driving on the road is just as dangerous as driving under influence or any of the other risks of distracted driving. And so this is a concern that we definitely should address for the importance of sleep. And ways to spread the word more to our student body. We talked about the 30-minute advisory period that the high school has once a month. We meet in a small group to discuss just concerns about school, about life here in town. And in freshman year when this topic was brought up, it was only very briefly touched upon. So we feel that more information needs to be distributed to the student body and to elaborate on this discussion. And we think one possibility for a trial run could be just to test it out for maybe a week or so to see how students respond and look at the differences in performance in school and all of these things. So we're just here to represent our student body to explain the importance of sleep and later start times for schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Donald Cottrell. I have 2 girls at Guilford Lake School, 2nd and 4th grade. I really just have questions tonight. I don't expect you'll answer them now, but I'm hoping they'll be answered throughout the evening or as soon as possible. If the science is clear on this matter, later school start times, why aren't we doing it already? And if not now, when? What's the next step? When's the deadline to complete the next step? And most importantly, what can we do to help? Thank you.
I can answer those. You want to answer those now? Just for people, I know we've got some new faces here, and I see some familiar faces as well. We've looked at this issue in some detail over the last 2 or 3 years. We looked at it in extensive detail last year during the budget cycle. Guilford is blessed with many, many things that help instruction and help education. One of the things that it is not blessed with is a compact single campus like Wilton, where all of the schools are basically in the same place. So what we've got is 4 neighborhood elementary schools with 2 middle schools that are a distance apart and a high school, obviously, and there are effectively 3 bus runs that have to go to the elementary schools, the 2 middle schools, or the single high school. When we were developing our budget last year, for us I think we determined from STA, our bus company, that in order for us to move our high school start time back somewhere around a half an hour, 25 minutes in that area, and not move the elementary schools back in equivalent time, because there's obviously problems at the other end, we would have had to have budgeted a new $600,000 to $650,000, and I think that's actually consistent with what the most recent RAND study said, that it would be about $150 per student increase. We thought, based on what was happening at the state budget level with our ECS educational cautionary grant, that it probably was not a good time to be looking at that level of a new expenditure, based on all of the other pressures that we thought we were going to be facing financially, and actually now have been along the lines of what we predicted. We did also, but we are actually now evaluating whether there's something that can be done in terms of grade realignment or school realignment that might allow us to shorten some of those bus runs, specifically the middle bus run. The middle bus run is the problem because you've got a child being picked up, say, at Sachem's Head, and his or her bus has to go to Adams, and then it also goes to Baldwin before it takes off on the elementary run, which might be back at Sachem's Head to go to A.W. Cox School. This is a very large town. It's 50 square miles, and we have routes that go into Durham to get kids. We have routes that go into Branford to get kids. We have routes that go into Madison to get kids. It is a hard town to get everybody there on time, and unfortunately, the longest bus run for any one group becomes the break between the starts of the high school and the junior high, or the junior high and the elementary. It just has to be that way. We can't have one bus getting there after the school has started. So we are looking at some grade realignment and school realignment issues. We're in the fairly early stages on that, but we expect to have some data. We talked about this tonight in our operations committee meeting. We expect to have some data on that before we start developing the budget, which will be soon. We're actually having a meeting, I think, at the end of it'll be your last committee meeting, won't it? You're in, what is it, October? Yeah, is that right? So there is the original initial budget meeting is going to be October 25th, and that's, I think, what we'll be talking about. I will say also, we're quite aware of the science. I don't think anybody disputes the science. We've read the studies. We read probably Dr. Moore got us half a dozen studies or more. Everybody agrees the science is quite clear. What is, in addition to transportation, somebody alluded to the survey that was done. We surveyed parents and students, and there was a surprising lack of cohesion in terms of what the views of parents and students were at all levels. It was, I want to say it was divided a third, between flipping some of the grades, pushing everybody back, or switching, or doing nothing. And it is, so I guess I'm going to answer your last question, which is what can you do? The science, you don't have to convince us of the science. I think you need to, I would ask you to dialogue with citizenry to see what matters to them. I'm sure if you talk to some people who don't, I have 2 teenage daughters. I don't need to be sold on the concept that we should, I'm sure they would be much happier if they started at 8. But there are a lot of people who think, when I was in high school and walked 10 miles in the snow uphill both ways, carrying a bag of books and everything else, that we're just being soft on them. No, we understand the science differently today than we did 50 years ago. We get that. But there is and not every issue in public education everybody agrees with 100%. We've all been around long enough to know that. But there is, I think the students talk about education. I think, getting information out to non-parents and non-students is actually important too, because this is a complicated issue. It's a complicated issue in lots of places. It's especially complicated here because of the geography and the way we have chosen to build 7 schools in different places divided by such distances. So I think we're very sympathetic. And if we can come up with a way that doesn't require spending $750,000 to do, I think that is going to be a factor. And I don't know, does anybody else have any comments about this? You've been an advocate for this for
Absolutely.
10 years.
My professional organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics, came out very strongly with a policy statement, and I see Dr. Canapari in the audience who will agree with us. I said when we discussed this issue last year or the year before, that as a pediatrician, if I had a pill that I could give to adolescent students that would A, increase student achievement, B, decrease car accidents, as the students alluded to, C, decrease suicide, the second leading cause of death in adolescents, I would use that pill for everybody. Unfortunately, there is no pill like that. So the science tells me that we need to change start time. It's imperative in order to achieve those three objectives. Now, my own view is that if this board adopted a policy that this was important and priority, and then went into the budget with that as a priority, I would be happier. As opposed to, what are we gonna do? We have this many priorities and so on. So I would plead in my last televised board member with my colleagues, who I know all agree with this, that it is time to set a priority that we gotta do this. If not now, when?
I'm sorry, I agree. I think also maybe, as we've discussed, but perhaps there are some stones left unturned. I'm convinced that there's, and like you had alluded to in a prior discussion, perhaps changing the start times even a shorter amount of time than we had originally looked at, or, flipping some schedules or staggering schools, or even doing the north-south middle school option. Those are things that we had not originally explored when we set out to do this a couple of years ago. So, I'm committed to looking at other opportunities for us to do.
So I also am in full agreement that the science is not in question. To be perfectly honest, it's great to hear people get up and advocate for this, but we need real ideas on how to get it done. Meaning, there's a few things. One, when we look at this seriously, there is a cost to it. I don't think there's any way around that. When we were talking about seriously, our budget was voted down that year, went to a third round, and that honestly derailed our talks, because if we're talking about adding $500,000 to $250 million to the budget, we can't pass the one that we have without that in there. It makes it very difficult for us to think about cutting teachers and increasing class sizes. So the first thing is pass the budget. Only 1 in 7 people came out to vote in the town on that budget. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the teachers also were, in fact, I believe, generally opposed to the start time increases. So I think it's important. It's not certainly the only factor, but it was widely split amongst the community and opposed by the staff. Thirdly, I think in this community, things like efficiencies from busing. We've done cluster stops, but the challenges in doing cluster stops, the pushback that we got in trying to economize our bus routes by having people walk a block or two. The number of hours that you and Mr. Baudin put in to deal with the complaints that we got from the community in trying to economize the bus routes, which not only saves money but also allows us to transport students more quickly, was very time consuming. So the realities of doing this are challenging. One of the things we're looking at, and I'll just say this as it's my last televised meeting and let you guys deal with it, but I think the only realistic way to do it in the geography of the town is to look at a north-south middle school option. We used to have that in the town, and now we have one that's up north that's 5-6, and one that's down south 7-8. So the busing north-south on that, aside from bringing in a whole other company to run another route, I've looked at the routes and the math and the times, and I can't see another way to do it. So I know we're talking about a committee or task force to look at that, but I will say, in my opinion, that's the only way that it would be realistic. So people need to think seriously about how they would tolerate having either 6, 7, 8, or possibly even 5, 6, 7, 8 north-south, which would allow the busing to work in the geography of this town. So I don't know if any board member wants to speak against the science of this. We all would like to see this happen, but we need to pass budgets. We need to figure out the bus routes. We need to figure out, how we're actually going to accomplish it, because the challenges in this community are not the same as some of the other communities that are doing it. So those are the things that I would say we need to do to actually make this happen.
Yeah, I won't repeat everything Dr. Moore said, but I do agree with his points. We did, when we went through this a year or two ago, we polled students, we polled parents, and we did get very divisive, conflicting. And we had plenty of people that were ready to do it, plenty of people that didn't want to do it. Some of the comments that we heard, we tried to shift things, flip-flopping the high school and the elementary schools, where that elementary school students, it wasn't optimal for them to be coming home in the dark. which can happen from next month until January or February. And also the need for some families to have their older students home to watch younger students when they get off the bus. So we had a lot of ideas, no perfect solution, and I agree that the biggest barrier is cost. So I would repeat the same thing. We are looking for all and every creative brainstorming idea that we can come up with, because we do all agree on the science. So I think that we can kind of put that to the side and just try to find a solution to it. And the more ideas we get, the more brainstorming we get, the better and the closer we get to finding a solution to this.
I do wonder if we need a subcommittee. You know, I know a lot of other towns, like Ridgefield is exploring it currently, they have a subcommittee of their Board of Ed. I don't know if on that subcommittee, if they have, you know, community members or what have you, but it might behoove us to think about that, task force, with members of the community, with, you know.
Can you call over there and see what they're doing? Just maybe email them.
I know,
Yeah.
yeah. I did watch an interesting Board of Ed meeting for Ridgefield that has us, you know, they are where we were exactly 2 years ago. I mean, it was like watching the same meeting.
It's a big town. It's a big town.
Yeah,
It's
it is a big town.
geographically very big town, country roads, you know.
If
Anyway.
if I may just, I don't want to prolong this because I've agreed with everyone else on the board and feel extraordinarily strongly about this. And like Mr. Bloss have, and two in my household that have gone through or are finishing up high school and couldn't possibly argue more for the need for more sleep and later start times. But a couple, Mrs. Sullivan has mentioned a couple of issues we've heard from parents and students involved in sports who are resistant to changes. I'm going to quote Mr. Bloss, who said more than once, this is probably one of the single most challenging issues for us and has been over the last few years, because it's very easy for a board to move on something that has this kind of scientific support when you also have a large part of the community behind you. But when the message you get from the community is so mixed, it makes the other challenges, cost, the busing, all those kinds of things, just even harder to get past. So to reiterate, I suppose, and add to my colleagues here, I mean, the thing that you can do is talk to your neighbors and your friends and your kids and their friends, and educate people about what's at stake here. Because I do think there's a sense that this will cause a great deal of change, so let's not upset the bucket. But for most of us, I think, if not all of us here, and no doubt many of you, we are already sacrificing something by not doing anything, and that's our kids' health. And also academics and all that kind of stuff. But I'm a researcher, I'm a mental health professional, I start with health. So that's what we need. We need to be able to overcome the kind of obstacles. We need great ideas, we need input, but we also need a sense that a good portion of the larger community is behind us.
Well, I think it's also
Can
our
I
job.
make a suggestion where this actually isn't on the agenda for discussion tonight, but it is going to be obviously on the agenda for a discussion. And if we have time, maybe we can circle back to this, but I think it's, we're getting on into the meeting, so I want to go back to public forum.
So is this Dr. Meyer's last meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Could we hear what you wanted to say there? That could be our last point before you move on.
No, we'll talk about it. And Dr. Freeman is doing a report on this, so I'm just trying to get back to public forum, if that's okay.
You're lost here?
No, I'd just like to, we have an agenda item on this, and so I'm just
Fair
trying
enough.
to get us on track.
So I'm Lorna Steele. We met before. It's a pleasure to see most of you all again. Dr. Freeman, it's nice to see you. Thank you very much for what each of you have done on the Board of Ed. The amount of time and effort you've spent, I don't say that lightly at all. I was elected to represent 60,000 of my peers on the Standing Advisory Committee to the Board of Governors of Higher Education in Connecticut. We took on articulation between the community colleges, the state colleges, and the private universities in the state. These are not small undertakings in education, and this is Guilford, it's not the whole state, but it's a lot of work, and you've done a lot of great things for our kids, and I genuinely appreciate what each of you have done, and what the rest of you will continue to do. I have a suggestion. It's a sort of a proposal. It's goes beyond us just standing here saying, please make a change. You know, we have spoken to our neighbors, we have spoken to our friends, we have spoken to our kids. It didn't take much time at all with our junior class officers to realize that this is not an abstract issue at all. To me, the science was clear from the get-go, as I believe it is to all of you. I don't believe that you're science deniers really in this room, so I'll not launch into a big, scientific explanation, but the kids got it right away. The kids got it right away. And the fact that Ali said, geez, we talk about how tired we are all day. It's so prevalent that it has become the wallpaper basically.
These are my words. It's the wallpaper of the high school experience in this beautiful facility in this fabulous town. That's not right, and that has to change. And I stood here before, it was 2 years ago. Certainly, my partners in crime here, it was a couple of years before that they were here. A lot of things have happened in that time. The Ice Bucket Challenge happened during that time. We have a new high school. Nick Fradiani won the, American Idol. A lot of things have happened. Nelson Mandela passed away, Brexit. Time has moved on, and we're still sitting here, without having taken action. I do understand the complexity. I really do. However, being faced with a gargantuan challenge is not an excuse for us to not meet that challenge. We have gotten to know each other well. We've gotten to know the data well. We've kind of been dating a long time on this issue. It's really time that we make a commitment and put a ring on it, and let's get to the next step. We need to actually accomplish this. So much has been done. I mean, I genuinely acknowledge that, and I know how much work that you've put into this, and thought and effort. The time is now. I was here for the triple referenda. I was here for the referendum before that, and the one before that, and the one before that. That minuscule number of voters who show up every single time, right here, okay? I'm with you. I was there for get out the vote to pass, the budget for you. This budget that you spent so much time crafting, every year you do it. And we're right here with you. We are. For me personally, my kids weren't even in high school. I just came to the Board of Ed to kind of see what was going on in the town and start participating. And man, did I get hooked in with a major issue. School start times was immediately apparent to me that we need to do something about it. A lot of things have changed in the last 4 years since the board has really been seriously considering this. But what hasn't changed is your duty to care for these students. That hasn't changed. The leadership and ability of this board has not changed. You are here to meet this challenge, and I absolutely believed you when you said this is when, not if, right? And here we are. We delayed. We put it off. We had other things to take care of. Nobody really anticipated 3 referenda to pass 1 budget. And now here we are with the state's inefficiencies at our door. That's not an excuse to not fix the roof that's leaking. It's basically like a crack in the foundation of this beautiful, beautiful high school. It's not going away. It's getting worse, and it is genuinely affecting the kids in this town. We don't have to necessarily really convince people of that. It's a fact, and you know it's a fact, okay? I know it's a fact. We all do, The fact is that we need to act, and it has to be now. We need a commitment from the superintendent, and we need a commitment from the Board of Education that this is not some sort of abstract thing that we're kind of moving to, that this is This is a priority in any budget climate. In any budget climate. There's no guarantee that next year it'll be better. There's no guarantee that the following year will be better. Now my son is in high school, okay? It is literally at my door now. It's affecting my family, okay? My next son, when this one graduates, he'll hit freshman year too. For the next 8 years, our inability to get this taken care of is right at my door. I am forcing my child to go to bed in a dark room with no electronics. They're in my room. Is that true? That's true. These are in my room. There's no television in there. You know, bedtime is strictly enforced in my house. He's not ready for bed at 9 o'clock. He's not ready for bed at 9:30. It's a biological fact. A lot of things have changed. Their biology hasn't. It really hasn't. And it's not going to. We need to change. We need to change this school district. We need, more than anything, this high school. It has to change. I don't believe for a minute that this can't be accomplished with a budget-neutral solution. Not for a minute. There were ideas and options that we really didn't necessarily want to entertain quite so much early on because, well, you know, it wasn't ideal. Well, we're past that now. We're in budget situations here where, you know, less than ideal, you know, plans and things that, you know, people didn't really want to look that far into, such as waivers for the 60% of high school kids, 70% of high school kids who don't even take the bus. We're driving around buses around Guilford, although they're much better with your cluster stops. I applaud you for that. We're driving around buses that are almost empty. I'd like to see, you know, our town attorney weigh in on, are we truly strapped to have one seat per kid per bus, even when alternates are available and ready to go? I drop my elementary school son off at before school every day at Suncatchers up at Melissa Jones. That's what fits. I have to get to work. I can't wait for your bus to come. 5 days a week, he doesn't ride that bus. Why should you have to hold a seat for my son who never rides that bus? These are things that we need to go further on. There are, I'm sure, numerous other examples of what we can do. And I absolutely don't believe that this has to be a $650,000 expenditure. From the lens we were at before, where we wanted to please everybody and you know, we wanted everything to be perfect, well, you know, yeah, 650 grand would have done the trick. We don't have that option anymore. And these kids are still getting depression. They're still suffering from anxiety, okay? If you think that suicidal ideation doesn't happen in this town, you are wrong, okay? Substance abuse, it happens. It happens to doctors' children, it happens to lawyers' children, it happens to custodians' children. I'm a cardiothoracic nurse. One of the saddest and most difficult populations that I help take care of and facilitate care for are people with endocarditis from IV drug abuse. They have exhausted their family supports. They've exhausted their finances. Their care providers don't even like to deal with them, okay? And they are faced with horrific physical, you know, debilitating conditions from endocarditis that causes septic emboli to the brain, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys. These are people whose lives, they're just ruined at 25, at 30. And when I say physicians' children, I'm not saying that, you know, for an emotional appeal. That's a fact. Substance abuse, you might not have to deal with the you know, 10 to 15 years into heroin addiction. I do. I see these patients. I see what they look like at 30 and they look like they're 60. This is serious. It has to be done, and it has to be done regardless of what the budget climate is. We need to do better. We need to figure it out, and we are here with you to do it together. You are the experts in education. I wouldn't expect you to walk into the cardiothoracic intensive care unit and start telling us how to titrate the drips. Maybe Dr. Moore down there, maybe, you know, he might be able to. But I'm just saying, I acknowledge that you are the experts in this field. You are the experts on this town, education in this town, but we need to work together and we need to explore all options, and we need to just get married. We need to get it done. We've been dating long enough. Our parents have met, okay? Please, it's time to go beyond that. It really is.
Thank you.
That's all I had. You sure you don't want a big, long scientific thing? No.
If it's possible, I would like to make a comment on this.
Sure. You're going to let me see if there are other members of the public that want to comment. Sure, go ahead.
Would you mind passing that down?
Hey guys, I'm Craig Canaperi. I am a parent of a boy at Baldwin and a boy at Cox. I'm also the director of the Pediatric Sleep Laboratory, the Pediatric Sleep Program at Yale. And I'm actually not here to talk about the science because we've talked about it a little bit. I actually just want to tell you a few anecdotes from the National Start School Later meeting that I attended in the spring. The fact is, tiredness, as Lorna said, is sort of endemic in our society. If you use an alarm clock, or in my case had a small child wake you up in the morning, you are probably a little bit sleep deprived. Sometimes a lot sleep deprived. One thing that became very clear from talking to educational leaders who'd been successful in making these changes, some places very quickly, some places over a long period of time. The thing that comes first is a willingness to change, and the details have to come afterwards. I can tell you that in Greenwich, where I was involved in changing the start times, it was not popular with a large segment of the population. It nearly came to fisticuffs at some of the school board meetings there, and yet they got it across. And they're still figuring out some of the details about how the busing and the sports are going. One parent involved with it had someone come and yell at them that they had yelled at their child that their parents had ruined Greenwich sports. In the meantime, the Greenwich football team is undefeated this year after having moved their start time about 45 minutes later. Newtown was exploring this in the spring and has already made substantial progress in making this change. These school districts are under similar budget constraints as we are. Again, every town is different. I met a woman from Fairfax County, Virginia, who had a district with 50,000 students, and they made the change. I met a superintendent from Maine, and he decided that this was the right thing to do. And like here, the teachers hate this, okay? When we looked at the survey data, which Mr. Mullet pulled up over there, actually 64% of families who are both taxpayers and voters in this town were supportive of a change. The students and the staff, less so. Now, there were some flaws with this. The staff were allowed to present the idea of the students, and honestly, we had people telling their teachers and their bus drivers told them they had to say that they were against start times. Many people came forward and said this after the fact, around the survey. This superintendent had a high school principal who did not want to make a change. So the superintendent said, go to the first period classes and see what you see. So the guy went and saw half the students asleep. He's like, okay, I'm down with the change, but the teachers hate it. So then they said to the teachers, well, your evaluations for the year are going to be based on the test scores of your first period class. After they said this, there was a rapid change of heart in the staff. Dr. Chuck Seisler, who's one of the doctors who really is the father of circadian biology in the U.S., talked about his daughter having to leave the house at 6 in the morning, getting home at 10 o'clock at night after coming back from a lacrosse game, and then having 2 or 3 hours of homework. He pointed out that this girl, and she's a child, does not have any protected time to sleep, whereas truck drivers, resident physicians, and airline pilots actually have 9 to 10 hour sleep opportunities, which they are guaranteed. And I just don't know why we're not guaranteeing this for our children, that we have allowed things to come to the point where we expect them to get up early against their biology and have so many extracurriculars and such a burden of homework that they cannot naturally get enough sleep. And finally, there's a doctor from Stanford who spoke about myths around sleepiness in school start times. And he talked about suicidality. we think about suicidality as a problem of depression, and it certainly is associated with depression, but it is also an issue of impulsivity. Teenagers, as a group, we don't think of them having great impulse control. In the era of an opioid epidemic, we are weakening their self-control by sleep depriving them. And he talked about the epidemic in Palo Alto they had of student suicides, of many students throwing themselves literally in front of trains to kill themselves. And he talked about a boy who was cheerful and everybody liked him. He was a straight A student, but he was the kid that you could call up in the middle of the night if you were having problems with your homework, because he was up. And everybody was shocked when this boy killed himself. I mean, the fact is, we are here to work with you, and I know the budget is terrible in the state. This is a hard problem to fix in our town. It's a hard problem to fix everywhere, but you know, smoking used to be really popular too. And it isn't anymore because people decided that it wasn't right for kids to smoke in school, or people to smoke in restaurants, or people to smoke around their children. We need to take leadership on this and commit to making a change, and then figure out the details later. And I'm wondering from your standpoint, what is it going to take for us to actually commit to a path to getting this done? I mean, we will educate people and get people out, but at the end of the day, we need you to say, this is the change we're making, this is our timetable. And I'm wondering how we start that tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to say something? Yeah, I was just going to comment from a student perspective. So I am a senior at Guilford High School, and for the past 4 years I have, I think as the junior representatives have spoken, that I've been attending these advisory meetings that we have usually monthly. And I think that the number one issue that we're having getting this across is that the information being relayed to the students is little of that of the information being discussed at something like a Board of Ed meeting. Because I would consider myself a very well-informed student when it comes to an issue such as this. But then again, I also participate in the Board of Ed, and I have discussions with adults about this particular issue. And I think the biggest problem is that getting that information from a Board of Ed meeting into the classroom where students are susceptible to learning about it and accepting what it means and what really school start times changing entails and the science behind it, as I think many people have mentioned. Because for me, going into these advisory meetings, knowing that we were going to talk about school start times, I was completely in favor of changing them, and hearing some other students waver a bit and not being as confident I was taken aback because I thought this was completely, all the science pointed to it, and there is no other option than to change start times. And I think that the biggest issue that we have is the number one people, or the number one group that's going to be affected by school start times are going to be the students. And I think if the students aren't well informed on what changing school start times are going to entail, I think it's going to be very hard for any body or any group to take action towards that unless the number one group being affected has all the information and all the statistics and all the science that's associated with that.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on this or something else?
Yeah, quickly. Hi, I'm Kimberly Schmid, and I just wanted to say I think most of us came out here tonight, maybe not necessarily to speak, but to come and say, please make this a priority going into this year, into this budget process. Thank you.
Well, I would urge anybody who wants to focus on this. There is going to be a budget impact. I think Dr. Moore is right. Yeah. And I think those of us who are going to continue on the board after November, whenever, this is going to be a very tricky budget season.
It's very tricky. I'm more recently involved in this, and I can hear that it's going to be incredibly complicated
hopefully we'll
logistically. And I think the idea of a task force or subcommittee sounds like a great potential forward. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Valerie Ferrucci. I came to support. However, I have no speech prepared. I have nothing with me. I just came to support. And However, I'm very happy to hear everyone here, or at least the majority, is in support of this. And I do also agree that a subcommittee would be a great thing, and I think, definitely there's families in the public that will help with that if it comes to that.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And look forward to this to continue.
Anybody else? Did you?
Can I ask an operational follow-up question?
Sure.
The task force, the committee, whatever, the next step, should we exchange some phone numbers after the meeting? Is that?
Well,
I'm asking in a pointed way,
we're going
but
to meeting
really
is
like
going to be after the meeting, maybe tomorrow.
We're getting married, right?
I'm sure I'm going to suggest Dr. Freeman be the clearing person on this. We haven't decided that we're going to do a task force. I think that might be something that your committee, the operations committee, would want to talk about.
I mean to ask it from a naive perspective.
Yeah, no, I'd like to hear Mrs. Cohen's report from Ridgefield about what their positive and negative experiences with that are. I promise you, this is not an unfamiliar topic for us. We know a little bit about this.
I've heard. Yep. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, and so from the point of view of maybe some additional group might be with the community relations part of it, not so much as the Board of Education part of it, right? Because I think we're all pretty satisfied that when there are big changes in Guilford, they are much better done from a bottom-up rather than a top-down. I don't think I'm going to speak just for myself. I'm not comfortable compelling a big change like this without community involvement. I just think that's not a good idea in this town.
And that's the follow-up question I think I'm trying to ask is how do we kickstart that? And we're not just saying let's do it, let's actually do it.
Well, I think if you're interested in doing something like that, send Dr. Freeman an email. His email address is on our website, guilfordschools.org, and we will put together whatever we're going to put together and
thank you all again
move
for your
accordingly.
time.
But show up for budget meetings.
The next 25th, correct?
Well, that's the initial one, and then there's going to be more in January. We're going to talk about the budget.
Week, I think.
I'm sorry?
It's 2 in the same week in
Right.
January, like a
Right.
Tuesday, Wednesday.
But there is going to be a budget impact. I mean, there is, and I think. I mean, I guess it depends on.
Invitation accepted.
Yep.
January 22nd and 23rd of the public hearing.
January 22nd and 23rd are the public hearings on the budget. Community members who want to see this as a budget priority need to come out to those meetings.
Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else at this point? All right. So I'm going to skip up to item 7 just because I know our students are they're looking edgy. And we don't like to sleep. And or they need to do their homework, which may be both. So we do have a couple of new student representatives, and so do you want to introduce them? Or
Sure, I'll go ahead. So my name is Brendan Balistraci. I've been a student. This will be my second year being a representative for the student body for Guilford High School. And today I'm joined by our 2 new student representatives, Dorcas and Noah, who will be joining us. Noah is a junior and Dorcas is a senior, and they have gladly accepted the invitation to represent the student body of Guilford High School. And together with me, they will be reporting on the elementary schools as well as the middle schools and, of course, the high school.
Perfect. So, Dorcas, can you introduce yourself? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, hi, I'm Dorcas Saka, and I'm a senior. I'm also an ABC student in the community, so I'm involved in many things at the high school, so part of Interact, YAG, so you'll find me around. I also play sports, so hearing about the sports side of the later start time really does impact me as well. So, yeah.
Welcome, Dorcas.
Thank you.
My name is Noah Horton. I'm a junior at the high school. I play tennis, and as Dorcas said, the later start times definitely do impact the sports players, and I'm looking forward to the years ahead of Board of Education meetings.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So do you have reports this evening?
Yes, we do have our reports. So from Baldwin Middle School, to start the year, they're working on some goals, including more student-to-student relationships as well as adult-to-student relationships. And they will continue to go forward with a growth mindset going into the new year. Also at Baldwin Middle School, Chromebooks have been distributed to all of the students, and so far it's going quite well. There have been some questions from the community about whether the extra weight added to all of these students' backpacks will affect them, but they are I'm pretty sure they're holding a public meeting to have parents discuss as well with administrators to talk about how that's going to affect and change student life going forward in the year. As well as the grade 5 took a trip to Camp Hazen, where all of the students had a full day session at Camp Hazen to work on team building, because as many of us know, they're working from the 75 student class of all the elementary schools up to now a conjoined around 300 students 5th grade class. And so that transition, to make it a lot easier, they're doing some team building exercises. At Adams Middle School, in September, the interdisciplinary teams hosted team building to, again, help the students kind of make that transition from Baldwin Middle School into Adams Middle School. And the 8th grade went to the Yale Center for British Arts to focus on a more visual type of learning and communication, as opposed to a written and spoken form of communication.
Okay, and at Melissa Jones, the students are getting back into the swing of things, and they've become readers, writers, and mathematicians, and they're really looking forward into becoming scientists soon. And also, the children are really excited about learning about more reading, and one of the things that the principal actually mentioned was that she walked into a classroom and she saw all the students spread out across the floor, and they were all reading from the reading books, and they were either reading independently or with a teacher's help. Also, the 4th grade class went to the Florence Griswold Art Museum in Old Lyme, and they were all really excited to come back with their paintings of landscapes. And this week, the New Haven Symphony Orchestra will be coming into Melissa Jones to perform for the students. And the students really enjoy the wonderful new playground that was added, including the tire swings and the climbing bridge especially. And at Guilford Lakes, the 3rd grade students traveled to Bushy Hill on this past Friday, to learn how the Native Americans lived and survived in Connecticut. And the PTO and enrichment started last week, which included art classes, chess, martial arts, tennis, and Zumba. And the 4th grade will have a guest speaker, a New Haven firefighter, coming to visit classes next week.
At A.W. Cox, they had a smooth start to the school year, and kindergarten through 4th graders were welcome back and have returned to the routine of everyday school life. And at Calvin Leet in September, the Calvin Leet 1st graders walked to the Guilford Fairgrounds to experience exhibits focused on traditions from the past and present day. Also, 3rd grade classes enjoyed an in-school field trip with representatives from the Connecticut Water Program. The students learned about the water cycle and responsible water use. And finally, Leet classes are starting to use the newly constructed outdoor classroom for instructional activities. The space has proven to be wonderful and has given an opportunity to students to read, explore, and experiment, as well as think deeply while enjoying the fresh air.
And now moving back to the high school. At Guilford High School, we've had a very smooth start to the school year. And another thing that just happened recently is that we implemented the new dress code that the policy voted on last year. And so far, it's been going very smoothly. We haven't had any real issues with that. And so implementing that, I think, was a very helpful thing to the high school and to the student body.
Okay, and also the fall sports season has been off to a great start. We actually have 3 teams that are currently undefeated. Boys soccer, volleyball, and girls cross country are currently undefeated. Football is 3-1. Field hockey is 7-1, 1-0. Boys cross country is 8-1. And swimming, even though this is just their first season, they're really excited, and they're really looking forward to working as a team. And another thing that was implemented this new year was the new homework policy, and that has had a really positive response from the students. And students feel like the homework is definitely reduced, and that they are spending more time doing things after school because of the lesser amount of homework.
Coming up this month, we have a day-sponsored assembly on October 25th, and this will be concerning the rising levels of opioid abuse and misuse. In addition, the IB program is underway at the high school. I myself am an IB diploma student, and it's been very exciting, and it has been clearly more internationally minded. For example, in our theater class, each student selected a country and researched storytelling traditions, and will be performing one story for the class. In addition, the CAS program has started, and we had our first official meeting on September 27th. CAS stands for Creativity Activity Service. And Thursday, we have a second CAS meeting to sign up for interviews and discuss topics for the projects. Lastly, the teachers for IB have been very invested and focused on the students developing a rich understanding rather than grades.
Terrific. Thank you. Questions, comments?
I guess the Camp Hazen thing, I mean, this is not the first year that we've brought kids from elementary school into 5th grade to bring 300 together. Is that new this year?
I don't believe so, but I'd have to check, Dr. Moore. I'm not exactly sure.
It's not more than 2 years old, though, right? I mean,
I can check with Mr.
It's one of our
Hamill
first
and get
kids
back to
going
you.
to. Anyway, I just thought it was kind of a neat thing, and I just was wondering where the idea came from.
It's the second year.
Second
if I'm
year,
not
yeah.
mistaken.
Okay.
And that the New Haven Symphony, I believe, is part of the Performing Arts Festival, correct? And they're coming to other schools as well?
Yeah, Cox.
Okay.
So Cox and Jones.
Okay. It's a treat.
Great. Well, you are welcome either to stay or if you want to go and get some sleep and do your homework, that's fine too. So I give it welcome to both of you, all three of you, and look forward to getting your, and I certainly on the start time issue, I think we're going to be asking you to get some input from, other student government groups and other student groups within the high school to let us know what their thoughts are too. Okay?
Thank you. Great first report. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Where were we? I think we were back to number 5. Thank you. The review and approval of expenditures for the month of September. Ms. Cohen?
Yes. We talked a little bit about this in the operations meeting just prior to this meeting, but expenditures for the month of September were $6,488,589.13. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of September were 21.17% of the budget as compared to 19.42%, which really has to do with timing of payments. And the warrant total for the month was $2,706,632.72. So,
all right.
Make a motion to approve the expenditures.
Okay. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Item 6, communications. I know we probably all got some communications about start times, and we've talked about those, I think.
Yeah, I
did get one from Jamie Nicolay on this issue.
Yes.
Yes. We all did, yeah. We all did.
Very thoughtful.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also received communication from a few parents with regard to Chromebooks. A couple, as Brendan had mentioned, were concerned about the transport of the Chromebooks back and forth from school. And there is another group of parents with concerns over technology in general and how do we address them, those concerns in a collaborative manner with the district, parent and district alike. So I did speak a little bit about this in operations as well and suggested that perhaps we have Kevin Mitchell, our Director of Technology, come in, and as well as our superintendents to perhaps have some sort of discussion or forum or presentation to address some of these concerns. Some of the main concerns, questions that have come up are, if certain buzzwords are typed into these school-owned laptops, what is the district's search terms that may be typed in, or personal use of those Chromebooks outside of educational purposes and practices. So it might be good to address that and have that on a future workshop agenda.
Yeah, I did mention in our last meeting, I think it would be a good topic for an upcoming workshop or CIA meeting, and I was happy to learn tonight during the student report that Mr. Hamill has scheduled an evening discussion on this topic for the parents at Baldwin. So I didn't know that at our earlier meeting. I was pleased to learn that here tonight.
Judging from the knapsacks I'm familiar with, I'm not sure that the weight of a Chromebook really makes that much of a difference. Right.
I think it would be a good conversation to have in public, and happy to pursue putting that on an upcoming agenda.
Okay.
Mr. Boss, yeah, I had a parent approach me to speak about just questions about teacher evaluation and how teacher evaluation is done, and I guess concerns about how there might be parent input if a student has had a year in which they feel like I don't want to put words into this person's mouth. If there's an opportunity for parent or student feedback in an evaluation process from some experiences they've had that have been
There is, under the state, the state-approved rubric, there is.
There is in our plan, yeah. So, teacher supervision is the responsibility of the principal at every building. A teacher evaluation is generally a combination of student performance and an administrator observation of the teacher's performance in the classroom. There is an opportunity every year for parent response, and that parent response is aggregated and becomes part of the teacher goal setting for all teachers at each school. The tool does not currently allow for individual teacher feedback to be reflected individually in a single teacher's evaluation.
Individual parent feedback.
So the parent,
yes, individual
right, so the parent
feedback.
feedback comes in what form at this point? I remember hearing about this a couple of years ago.
Every year, parents are asked to complete a school climate evaluation. From that school climate evaluation, that has questions that are related to teacher communication, teacher expectations. The teachers and the principal in the building use that information in aggregate to set goals as a building. And teachers may have goals that are reflective of the parent input that was received.
Okay.
But the tool itself doesn't have individual parent surveys in which parents are asked to comment on individual teacher performance. The vehicle for that is again, the principal who is responsible for the supervision of all teachers in his or her building. So a parent who has individual feedback, positive or about improvements that could be seen, would be encouraged to contact his or her individual principal and communicate that individually.
Because I do think, having filled out, I wasn't quite clear what you're referring to. Having filled out the survey at the end of the year, it is certainly general. And for parents at the high school level, you've got 6, 7, sometimes 8 teachers a year, so that is even extremely challenging unless every experience has been extremely similar. To reflect anything like that in that survey. Okay.
Yeah. While the state law allows for that sort of individual feedback, it doesn't require it, and at this time the Guilford tool doesn't have a vehicle for that kind of individual feedback to be received. But I would encourage parents to speak with their principals.
And have we ever considered, this was a conversation that ensued with this individual, but have we ever considered student feedback about their experiences? Who knows better about their experience in a given year than the kids sitting in the classroom? Is that something we've ever thought about or considered?
In the same way that the parent feedback is collected, students complete that survey annually as teachers. And again, it's more about general expectations, procedures, and vehicles in place, not about your individual teacher. Our high school students don't currently complete end-of-course evaluations the way college students do.
Something to think about. Okay, that was a communication.
Yep. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay. Superintendent's report. Enrollment?
Yep, so we only have 3 items on the report this evening. And on my first item, enrollment, I'm here to tell you that we are past the October 1st deadline. We talked about this at some length at your prior meeting, and there's really been no significant change. And so at the district level, We continue to defy the projections, and we're currently running at approximately 250 students over what our demographic study had projected for this year. We are in essentially our 4th year of flat enrollment, hovering right around 3,400 students for the last 4 years. We were never expected to be increasing, we were expected to be decreasing, and that's simply not happening. We also spoke at length about some spikes in the elementary level. Elementary class size is at 18.5, exactly what the average class size was last year. The difference is that last year that 18.5 was distributed very evenly across our 5 grade levels in our 4 buildings. This year we have some classes that sit as low as 12, and we have some classes that are reaching 23 and 24, particularly in the 3rd grade classes at LEAT. We heard those parents come and comment, and they asked for an additional section to be held over into that group as they move into 4th grade next year, and I'm sure that they will be coming to your budget meetings, but no significant change. We will finalize those enrollment numbers over the course of October, and at your next meeting you will have the official October 1st enrollment numbers. We're projecting it to be approximately 3,962, again, right around that 3,400 mark at which we...
3,392, 62. I think you said 3,900.
I apologize.
Yeah, yeah.
3,362.
That would be a record.
That would be an increase. No, we're not going up. Update on the state budget. My second item is essentially the same. I have no new information to share over our last meeting. In the last couple of weeks, other superintendents from around the state and I have been to the Capitol. We have met with leaders of both parties. We have encouraged both of them to come to an agreement. At this point, there has been a Democratic plan floated. There has been a Republican plan floated. Both of those plans would come in under the umbrella that this year's budget has afforded. This budget assumed a reduction in state support for us here in Guilford. The only bad result for us in Guilford would be if there continues to be lack of agreement, and if there is no budget agreement or compromise reached, and if we continue to operate all year long under the governor's executive order, we are projected to lose $2.7 million in state aid. The plan and the umbrella that the town did provide for us accounts for the first $1 million of those losses. And the town has agreed moving forward that the additional 1.7 in losses will not be made up in a supplemental tax bill, that it will be made up by looking at town surpluses, but also by looking at reductions in service in this year's current budget. And so we're monitoring that very closely. We continue to be lobbying as strongly as we can. CAPS and CABE are both very active and working. I need to say again that our local representatives, Ted Kennedy and Sean Scanlon and Vinnie Candelora, have been helpful and have been responsive and have asked us what the impact would be on us locally, and we will continue to work. I also have concerns, however, for year 2. So obviously any agreement reached will be for a 2-year budget, and even if we get through this year and the $1 million of reductions covers us, I, for the first time, am preparing to come to you during this year's budget cycle with suggestions for reductions in service if that is necessary because of the loss of state funds. So every single year that I've come before you, it's 7 times now, I have told you that this is not a status quo budget, this is an improvement budget. And based on what we face at the state level, I don't know if I will be able to make that statement coming forward this year. We might very well have to work very hard to provide a status quo budget this year. But I will continue to monitor, I will continue to lobby, and obviously when we come together to begin working on the budget, we will have to look at those difficult choices. Which leads me to my third budget item, which was...
Excuse me.
I'm sorry?
I understand that because we're still operating under the governor's plan, that we did not get a payment that we would normally have gotten at the 1st of October. Is that correct?
ECS dollars are released directly to the town, not to the school, but that is correct. The town, I believe, did not receive their first installment of ECS funds this year. Now, that first installment is a 1/4 of the total payment, and again, is covered by the expectation of a loss of $1 million. So the town accounted for fewer dollars in state revenue this year than we had in the past. Should there be an agreement moving forward and the balance of those payments come in, it would make up for that in full.
But if this impasse continues, when would the next payment be normally received? I'm sorry?
January.
In January.
It would be a 25% in January.
That would bring us up to the 50% mark, and at that point, if there continues to be lack of agreement, we may
Then
very
we'd be
well
over the $1 million.
We would very well need to start discussing mid-year changes.
Assuming that the governor didn't amend his executive order.
Right.
You know,
Correct.
that is also a possibility.
Yes, that is correct.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, you know, what the parameters are here.
And again, I need to point out that the town of Guilford really responded to this, I think, in a very thoughtful and planful way. There are other school districts that did not account for any loss in revenue and are already working with budgets where they have unfilled teaching positions, where they're already freezing. So we have a budget. Our budget wasn't what we had hoped for, but is completely reasonable and fair, and we're working under that budget. I don't believe that we're going to end up in a situation where we are not covered by the plan that the town has put in place. But we are planning for that eventuality should it come to pass. I don't believe that that's going to happen. I'm not prepared to come before this board and tell you that we need to begin making budget reductions to the plan that we have in place at this time. But I continue to monitor and I continue to lobby. We will be presenting a very careful budget presentation to you when we start planning next year's budget. Remember, this is a 2-year budget that the state will agree upon. I'm not expecting to see increases in state aid to Guilford, and I'm not expecting to see the same level of state aid that we have received in the past. And we'll have to decide how to accommodate for those lost revenue dollars.
Okay. All right. Anything else on that? No? Your bus routes and start times.
So my third item was also anticipated for tonight. I planned on coming to speak to you about the updated bus routes and possible amendments to start times. We've had much of that conversation. The RAND report that was released was something that I planned on discussing with you tonight, and that has been touched on. And the RAND report goes to a conversation that was part of our conversation some 4 years ago. RAND looked at what would happen if start times were changed. I believe their language was universally at statewide level and looking at a population level solution. The RAND report acknowledges the expense to locals and the difficulty for locals to make this change individually. Their estimate of $150 per student for Guilford lands just above $500,000. Not knowing our geographical challenges, I think it's a fair estimate. We landed between $600,000 and $750,000 when we looked at estimating that same price. What the report further suggests is that states would recognize, in fact, increased revenue, that the state would save monies in billions of dollars, and they would save them in the areas of healthcare, and they would save them in increased productivity at the state level. When people come and ask what they can do to be helpful, in addition to talking to neighbors and continuing to keep this topic front burner for the Board of Education, I would encourage residents to speak to state legislators. We said early on that this would be an easier thing to do if the state did it in whole. And if there were a way to take those dollar savings from the areas that would make the savings and filter those back to the locals, it would be an easier decision for locals to make. Now, I don't for a minute pretend to suggest that this would be an easy conversation at the state level. But that is one way to think about it. Several people referenced that in the last 4 years I have said, just as many of the board members said, that I do not question the science and that I do not for a minute undervalue the importance of this decision. For me, this has never been a discussion about if we should be changing start times. It has always been a discussion about how and when we should be changing start times. How has been an incredibly difficult question to wrestle with. We looked at making just a small change. We looked at making a larger change. We looked at combining our runs to make 2 bus runs instead of 3 bus runs. And we got scatter on the survey. We also had a really healthy conversation where parents came in and didn't just fill out the survey, but stood up and spoke to the board about their concerns about changing start times, as did our staff members. I do need to take issue with the suggestion that our staff members told students how to respond on the survey. I do not for a minute believe that that happened. I do know that staff members shared with their students in the advisory meetings that this was a difficult decision and talked about the complexity of the decision. I think Brendan was on point when he suggested that we need to have more of those conversations. But I just want to make sure that I say publicly that I have every faith in our teachers. I know that they engaged in the complexity of the conversation. I don't for a minute believe that they told their students how to respond on a survey. And when it comes to when, I just want to note, as many board members did, that when has become more difficult. How was always difficult. When has become more difficult when we looked at a year where a referenda failed 3 times and we needed to convince the community to continue to support the work that we do in the district. I understand the position of leadership sometimes needs to make difficult and unpopular decisions. But when we count on the community to understand and support the work we do, I believe that this work requires education first and not a damn the torpedoes strategy to leadership. And now this year, when we're possibly facing a loss of $2.7 million, when I have a reduction list on my computer for the first time ever before planning an enhancement list on my computer for part of the budget that I bring forward to the board, again, I'm not suggesting that I don't value the change. I'm suggesting that when is becoming more challenging as we think about not just maintaining what we've done, but actually needing to actively protect the values that we currently have in the system, the goods that we currently have in the system, before adding the next good. And I don't for a minute believe that it's not an inherent good to let students sleep later. I just have not found the answer to how, and I'm finding it harder to address the answer of when, but I remain committed to answering both. Somebody said that we don't shy away from tough challenges. We also don't pretend that the challenges don't exist and simply make an easy call. I'm committed to continuing the work, and I'm continuing to be in this for the long haul. I think this is a long haul solution. But that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer questions.
Just reiterate that what we were sort of finishing up with when we were in the middle of the public comments, that we need people to come to the budget forums. We need citizens, students, anyone to become active members in the process and see what the process looks like and the hours and hours that are put into it, because we want to hear it affects everyone. And we need brainstorming solutions, because just to talk about that we agree on the science and this is a big challenge isn't a solution. We need to all work together to find solutions if we want a how and a when. So join in.
Did you want to add something? I cut you off. I'm trying to get back on track.
No, I was just going to make the point about surveys. And that is, when we do surveys or elections, it is most effective, in my opinion, if the population, if the universe that's going to vote is educated. If they're voting on a motion, then I don't know how to interpret it. And in terms of this, we had talked about if we're going to go forward, we need to educate the community and the students. I think Brendan mentioned that very clearly, that we just can't survey people, because I don't know what those results really mean. That's all.
Anybody else?
This is a little off topic, but I'm not sure where it would fit. I corresponded with you about this more than a month ago, and as we approach the public hearings for the budget, I was wondering about the progress of the athletic report and when we can expect that. I would hope that it would be in the next couple of weeks.
I have a meeting with Mr. Jarvis and Mr. Macenti either this week or next to respond to some questions that I had as they were working on some initial responses.
Okay.
So I hope to have it early in the budget process. First meeting is a couple weeks, so it's early in the budget process.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anything else?
I just wanted to mention, Dr. Friedman, I did receive a communication and set them straight. There are some people in the community who believe that you do not work for the district full-time.
Really? Thank you for correcting me.
I think I think the public should know that you work 150% for the community full-time. I don't know how many.
That's not what I've heard, I'll have to say. That's,
yeah. Well, people have pointed out that he does spend some time at UConn and does spend some time in the country of Jordan. And I pointed out that that time accrues positively back to the district.
There's no question.
So. Yeah. But I think there is some perception, and that we should be aware of that and correct it whenever we hear it.
I appreciate you bringing that up. So in addition to my duties here, and I assure you I hit the 40-hour mark every single week, but in addition to my duties here, I am also an adjunct professor at UConn in the NEAG School of Education. I work primarily in the principal preparation program, and as part of that, I've been privileged to be invited to do work in the country of Jordan, and every time that I have visited Jordan, I have done that on my vacation time here from the Guilford Public Schools, and have been privileged, and I agree. I think each of those opportunities helps me to do my job better here in Guilford, and I have thanked the board on many occasions for allowing me to continue to do that work. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, this is, both of those activities are with our full knowledge and our, not only our blessing, but our affirmative encouragement. For example, what do you think about a guy who's, say, an adjunct professor in a principal preparation program? I don't know, like when a school district has to hire principals, might have some connections that maybe somebody else might not have. I think that's worked to our advantage, and I think we're quite aware of that. So, but thank you for mentioning that. Anything else? Okay. Okay, board agenda, this is our annual big grant application to the United States government. This is, good luck. I'm going to refrain from saying that this is less than 1% of our operating budget, but it is less than 1% of our, it's about 0.5% actually of our operating budget. Is there a motion to approve the federal program entitlements under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in the total amount of $288,911?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or other whining comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Item 9.2 is the preliminary budget timeline, which is, I guess, do you want to just go through these dates for the record, and Mrs. Renner?
Oh, certainly, glad to. The first event, well, the first thing that happens is already the leadership team has been discussing the budget and working internally to bring the information together. Next, in 2 weeks at our next Board of Ed meeting, we all meet with the district leadership team, which is essentially the school principals, and we hear what's important to them. Then the information will be compiled, and the next key time is early January. So in early January, we'll get our budget books, we'll begin to go through the information and understand it. And then there are 2 important meetings that the public should be aware of. They're both held at Adams Middle School, and the dates are, I did skip something, though. The dates of those meetings are January 22nd and 23rd. Before that, though, I think it's important to comment that our board meets with the Board of Finance to go through our budget both before and after we all have a chance to receive it. And that's important for the way the boards work together, so there are no surprises when the Board of Finance receives our numbers. And then after the public hearings in January, the process goes through with our board understanding the numbers, deliberating, and then I don't know how much detail at this point to go into, but later in the spring, in February, we'll vote on the budget. And from there, it will go to the Board of Finance and then the voters.
Yeah, I also want to note, and we missed it earlier, our meeting, the board's meeting with the leadership team is on Monday, October 23rd, but on Wednesday, October 25th is actually the first opportunity for public input. And the public has two opportunities to comment. One up front to tell you what they would like to see you do with the budget, and then the January dates allow them to actually comment on the draft budget that I have put in front of you before you take action on that budget. And I wish we had pointed that out earlier, but October 25th would be the first opportunity to speak to the board, to encourage the board to include something, to not include something, to set priorities at that time.
What time is that?
That is Wednesday, October 25th, and it is generally a 7
It's
o'clock meeting.
7:30.
7:30 at
That's
Adams.
what's listed on our website.
And where is it?
Adams.
Okay.
Those are the choir room meetings at Adams.
Okay.
And I apologize for not catching that date earlier.
Okay. All right, so are you going to miss being involved in this budget anyway?
Yes.
Anybody else? No comment. No comment. Dr. Myers is taking the fifth. All right. The energy performance contract, item 9.3, that's really not ready for action tonight at all.
We don't have any further information.
No, we did, I should say, we did have a meeting with Mr. Sands and me and Mr. Gurnham, and I don't know, it seemed like about 25 people talked.
All engineers.
All engineers except for Mr. Sands and I, where there was a really helpful, spirited, detailed discussion and review of the contract. I think there is a better sense of what the expectations were, what the upside is, what the potential downside is, what the assumptions were that make it a close call, but I think a less risky than maybe we had thought from the beginning, but also maybe not with the potential benefit as we thought from the beginning. So it is kind of a moderate. Maybe I'm paraphrasing more than Kola Ronan would say, but there's still some things to talk about. I think specifically what it would look like in the budget, what lines would change. Where would they be? Would they be on the town side, the Board of Ed side? How does it all get accounted for? So I think those are important issues for us to know. But I think the town should be assured that we are doing our due diligence on this and being very careful. Item 10, Policy Committee.
Policy Committee met 2 weeks ago. We spent some time discussing the dress code changes to the policy that were made last spring. You heard our student reps mention that it's going quite well at the high school. But we did want to take a look back because just for context, it was a high school committee that really spent a lot of time in the past academic year going through that, brought it to the policy committee, we reviewed it, and then certainly reviewed it as a board. But we're just taking a second look to make sure that it meets the needs not just of the high school, but of all our schools. So that's something we're in the process of. We are looking at a couple other policies in response to changes that the state legislature made in the last year. Believe it or not, they had some time to do some of those. So we're looking, there's a child abuse reporting. Am I remembering that correctly? Yep. I'm looking at Mr. Bowden for assistance. We're looking at our policies and our regulations. We're looking at CABE's proposals. CABE is generally extremely helpful anytime the state makes some changes in guiding boards of ed to likewise make the appropriate changes in their own policies and regs. So we're looking at that, and then we will be keeping up with any other changes that happened in the state legislature that impact the work we do and any changes we'll need to make to other policies and regs. Mr. Bowden, do you have anything to add to?
Just that we're meeting next week. We've posted
That's
a special
right.
meeting.
We're adding, sorry, thank you. That's exactly right. We have a special meeting next Wednesday at 5 o'clock to continue our work because oftentimes what happens is over the summer, all of this stuff comes from the legislature and we need to play a little catch up.
Okay. Operations Committee?
I think we've touched on everything.
Okay. curriculum, instruction, and assessment?
So we do have a workshop meeting, the committee meeting prior to the workshop, next workshop. One of the things we had asked for, and I started to see them trickle in at various back-to-school nights and things, is the written homework policy. The one that I was a little concerned about is does Adams have one written at this point?
Adams is not finalized at this point, so all of the faculties were working to write those collaboratively. 6 are complete. Adams is finalizing theirs. They spoke about it prospectively at their back-to-school night, but not to a final document. Theirs will be completed, I believe, before your CIA meeting.
October 18th is when they're scheduled to be finished. I do have copies of all the other buildings that I'll be forwarding to you, but Catherine will not have, that faculty will not have finished until their faculty meeting on the 18th. They did it. They worked on it last week on the 4th, and then the next faculty meeting is Wednesday after next.
Which would be a week before the...
Yeah, it'll be done before your CIA.
Hopefully we'll be ready. And depending on, I mean, we still have to work to finalize the agenda, depending on how much time we want to devote, and if they do want to come, discuss any of the process or issues, I think that would probably be welcome. I don't know.
Principals? Invite principals to speak to it?
I don't know. I mean, I think something to think about anyway.
Sure.
I'm not sure. Again, I haven't looked at the agenda and
the only other thing that were on there left over from this summer and from last spring was an update with world language.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we can discuss offline a little bit, but I think this is important enough, especially if there was substantive discussion at the school level or, in particular, around the middle school area. It seems like the elementary schools, it was fairly straightforward, and the high school got one out that wasn't too controversial. But in particular, I'd be interested to hear what the conversations were at the middle school levels and how they're being implemented, so if they're available.
I think it's the significant item on the agenda for your meeting. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to invite the principals.
And they'll be attending the workshop afterwards anyway, so it's a natural meeting for them to come a little early if they can.
Yep.
Yeah. I would look forward to hearing from them too.
Okay, town committees, anything going on with either land acquisition or pensions? Standing building? No? Okay. The Learn Board of Directors, we are going to need a replacement for Dr. Moore.
Officially, yes.
Yes, officially. So anybody who, they meet during the day, right? They meet mornings?
Yeah, their board meetings meet during the day monthly, and I will continue this year to serve on their executive committee, but don't generally attend their board meetings unless I'm presenting on some topic to the board.
Okay. Item 11, public questions. Anybody? Please.
So I'm new to town and I'm a little bit confused. If you guys have been discussing moving the school time for 4 years and the board is behind it, how come you haven't educated the public? Why are you throwing it on us? The students are saying that they don't know, that they didn't know as much as they learned today, and that the students in school are against this. And you guys are throwing it on us to teach the public in order to support this, but all of you are pro this, so how come nobody has gotten to school? You have Dr. Kanapari, who's an expert, who could have come into schools and talked to the students. You have Lorna, who's a nurse, who could have come and talked to the students. Now I'm here, I can come and talk to the students. You guys have resources, world leaders in your town, and nobody has come and talked to the students. The students themselves told us that the teachers influenced them. Thank you.
Craig Mullett. I have 2 children in the Guilford system. I just have 2 clarification questions to understand what actions the board has taken from prior minutes. So this is from Monday, September 12th, a year and 1 month figure in this room. And I'll read the part of the minutes and ask for clarification. Dr. Strassi commented that a number of Board of Education members are particularly interested in the start time issue and suggested that a working group be formed to help move this issue forward. Dr. Freeman was in support of this recommendation and agreed to assist with getting this group together. So I'd like to know when the group met and what was discussed.
I think you actually did get involved, and I think, weren't you part of that?
This is September 12th, 2016.
Right.
So I have met infrequently with members of the community who are interested in this activity. I did not form a task group that met through last year. I have no meeting dates, no agendas, no minutes to share with you about a formal task force. I did not include a recommendation to change start times in my budget last year as I was making other rescissions in the budget and could not in good conscience bring forward an addition of that type. There was no task force formed. I have no agendas, no minutes, and no schedule to share with you for that task force. I met informally with members of the community on and off for the last 4 years.
And this is from the budget meeting in January this year, January 24th. Mr. Bloss commented that because a small 15-minute change would be budget neutral, this option could be discussed further. Could you clarify how much that's been discussed, where and when?
You're talking about a budget meeting that was not discussed as the budget meeting. I think I said that.
I will read your comment again.
I'll tell you
Mr. Bloss commented that because a small 15-minute change could be budget neutral, this option could be discussed further outside of the budget process.
My recollection is that we were told when we were looking at this a year ago or 2 years ago that 15 minutes wasn't worth it, that the research said that 15 minutes didn't add enough. And that I think, am I making that up?
No, one of our first suggestions, and I think the language that I used was a small step approach, that I think as far back as 4 years ago, we talked about the idea of taking small incremental steps. And at that time, 4 years ago, we were told that the sleep deficit is compounding, but that there was no research to indicate that small incremental improvements would have an impact. And in fact, the community members with whom I met strongly worried that offering a small incremental change would be an easy out. And so when we offered the survey with some detailed options, we removed that. It is my understanding that in the last couple of years, research has begun to swing, and that there is some research support recently that suggests that small incremental changes may in fact have a compounding positive effect, just as the sleep deficit can have a compounding negative effect. We did not continue to explore that last year.
Would you support a 15-minute change without anything further?
In fact, in that meeting, Dr. Kanapari, in the preceding, and I quote again from the meeting minutes, Craig Kanapari advised the conference of the school times to be held in April where there will be further discussion. In the analysis of options discussed on the topic, it was determined that a small change of 15 minutes could be done without a large budget impact. Dr. Kanapari recommended that the board revisit and reconsider this option. And that's how you responded. But no action has been taken. I have no further questions.
Let me, just to be fair, now you've watched us work on this for a long time, and I think you're quite aware of what we've been trying to balance here. And this is not something that we've just tried to ignore. It's not something we've tried to kick down the road. The reason that we started to change school bus stops to cluster stops was exactly for this purpose, to try to see if we could do a 15-minute later start time with an increased efficiency with school buses that wouldn't add any runs, right? That's what happened. We did, in going to more cluster stops last year, we found that it was exponentially harder. We met with much more parental resistance than we were expecting. We were not able to go, I mean, I forget what the numbers were in terms of the number of appeals and the number of successful appeals.
It was more than 100.
Well, last year, not this year.
This year, our numbers were down.
Right.
Appeals were somewhere, I think, in the 30s.
Last year, we had over 100 appeals that were requested on school bus changes. We ultimately conceded and moved back nearly half of all the changes that we put in place because of the significant resistance and because of the significant concern for safety at those stops.
There is a way to do 15 minutes different. Now, you could do two things. You could either move everybody back 15 minutes, or you could try to go to more cluster stops at the high school. Or we're actually looking at this other alternative that I think Dr. Moore has mentioned, that without getting the details from STA, I think all of us think that it might be a viable answer to go to a north 6 to 8 or 5 to 8 school and a south 5 to 8 school. That's the problem. The problem is the middle run. It's not the high school run. It's the middle run where we run
And
kids
Bill,
to
in
school.
fairness to the board, I mean, yes, that was brought up at one meeting, but I actually had several conversations offline with people within your, the group that supports the school start times, and there was ambivalence about doing that because they felt that if we moved it 15 minutes, it would sort of take the pressure off to make a real impactful change. So I don't think the board heard a clear message from the community or from the group of parents that are advocating, more strongly for the later start time that a 15-minute move was what was wanted. And I think if that's something that you want to push for without a budget impact, it probably could happen this year. But that was not like a clear message from anyone that was a huge desire on the part of the community in my perception.
Well, the question that I have for the board, and it gets back to Dr. Meyer's point, does the board want to make a change? And if the board does want to make a change, figuring out what can be done within the realms of the budget limitations, there's a lot of more creative suggestions in terms of high school students opting out, which is, according to certainly some research, permissible in the state of Connecticut. The school times can be changed too, the length of the school day. This is something other school districts have done. The high school time, if it changes, is shortened slightly. That frees up more busing time, and you add the minutes and get as much as you can within the parameters of the budget constraints. I think the frustration that I and many other parents have felt is that the board has taken zero action to change the times in 4 years. And other schools in the state that started this discussion after us have moved.
How many?
And I'd like to know when the board will commit to trying to change the times and working back from that.
How many schools have changed in Connecticut?
Greenwich has changed and Newtown is changing as well. And two.
Okay.
And then two towns, as you've heard, Richfield and Westport, are active reviewing, and some other towns as well.
I guess
There
I
was
would
another town that just said last week that
somewhat argue against the claim that we've made no effort, or we've done we spent hours and hours with the district management, what are they, DMC?
District Management Council.
Going over things, so we haven't.
I didn't say there's been no
no
effort. Let me be very clear. There's been no change. Thanks.
So something that we're going to have to talk about is if people want to do this, and let's say that we do go to 2 bus runs and it costs $750,000. What programs are we, either, that's 1.5% in our budget. Are we going to reduce other programs in order to do this? Or are we going to try to go out to the voters with something like this? I mean, I think there was some real concern last year about going, adding it into a budget document, right? I mean, based on some of the things we've talked about. That's true. But,
Well, I think that, look, it's not that we have not been trying to find the solutions. It's that we haven't found a solution. There are ways to do this, but they involve fairly major changes to the way the school system works. If we go to this north-south middle school thing, which was a plan that was in place several years ago and was discontinued because of resistance in the town, that does help with, as Mr. Bloss has pointed out, this middle school run, which is the big hang-up on the bus situation. This is a major cultural change in the town. And it's not something that the board is going to do just willy-nilly without a lot of input from the community. We are looking at the issue of, whether you can get consents and whether that helps. The preliminary indication from our lawyers are very negative in that area, but we will continue to pursue it. But I would also say that it's very difficult in the current environment we're in to come up with a plan to do this that is going to cost substantial money. I mean, we are, as a board, somewhat shy of going to referendum with a big increase in cost for something like this, where there is some support in the community, but which, at least from our surveys, has not been particularly strong support, and where we've been turned down at referendum. I just think that we need...
Can I just clarify that this wasn't on the referendum that failed, correct?
No.
No, but I mean, it's really
I
important.
understand the context that you're painting, but I just want to be clear that this wasn't included. It wasn't part of it. It was.
Well,
That is absolutely correct. But I think that we are charged with several things as a board. Certainly, the education and the health of our students is primary. But the vehicle by which we do that is the budget. The vehicle by which the people that we need to answer to is the voting community. And so in a year when we had a lot of energy on this board behind this idea, to have the budget go down 2 times without the additional $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 that we thought it was going to take to do this, makes it very hard for us to figure out how to push this forward when we can't get the town to vote on the basic budget, when we are concerned that we might have to cut teachers. So I understand that people are very angry, and I don't blame you. I truly don't. As I said, I now have a senior in high school, and I have, as you mentioned, doing 7 years of getting up at 6 in the morning and watching kids drag themselves through the day. It is not healthy. But this is a very complicated issue, and it is extremely, I think, optimistic to think that the 9 of us can push this through a town that is resistant to it. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. Should we get a task force or a subcommittee going? I agree with Mrs. Cohen completely. Absolutely. Should we look at other places we haven't looked at? Absolutely. But I do feel the need to get the public to understand that we do have to pass budgets in order to make things happen. And if the town is not going to come out and support those budgets, it is very hard to consider new ideas that aren't included already in the budget.
I think it's also important to recognize that this is our forum for educating the public. And, you know, these are public meetings, and we discuss these topics, and obviously we hope that people, if they're concerned about a topic, are tuning in, and I don't mean literally tuning into GCTV, but I mean tuning in and understanding where we stand on a topic, that this is on an agenda or what have you, and has been over the course of many years. And we need to work collaboratively with the public. So, Irina, when you're saying, you know, we're putting it on you, I mean, we do a lot of footwork to communicate to the public. We use these forums, we are out in the public and the community, but we need, we need supporters. Guilford High School swimming, again, a very small budget item comparatively speaking, but the reason that happened is because they were out there in a down budget year, in a year where we
how much was the swim team? Was it $60,000?
No. $6,000.
$6,000? Thank you.
And I mean, I think it's important.
The point is that we need people out there educating the public, not just the Board of Ed, but we need supporters of a school start time change to be out there working with us and educating the community. So, if you're available to speak at schools, that's great. I mean, that would be a welcome suggestion to the board.
And to put a positive spin on this, I mean, it is encouraging to see renewed energy on the part of the community to take this on. The thing to understand is that, yes, we actually had a fair amount of energy going into that budget. I mean, I remember if I can say, like, we sat before one of those meetings and really talked about whether we should put, it was incomplete, whether we should put it on the referendum, and, you know, it was close, but we decided that we needed to get this budget passed and then try to push it for the next one.
I was
And then
there,
the budget,
I
know, and
remember.
I was there, but let me finish, please. So that went down not once, but twice, passed on a third time. So the budget that we had the last spring, you know, was also encouraging, and I think maybe the timing is right to revisit this with a task force and with, you know, improved and increased community involvement. But I don't think it's fair to say that the board, you know, hasn't wanted to do this or hasn't, you know, been thinking about it. I mean, this may push, it is very helpful to have community push to get it back up towards the top, but that, you know, is a very realistic thing that derailed the conversations that we wanted to push forward.
I think it's also good to take a historical perspective. This board worked very hard X years ago to build a new high school. That was at the height of the recession. And many people said to us, are you crazy? You know, you're talking about $95 million or so at a time that people are hurting, and that's going to get voted down. Well, guess what? The community... Go right ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.